Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Robert Kraft from SNN.Network, and thank you all for joining us. You're watching our keynote, our Q&A with Tolga Kumova. He's a private investor from the land down under, from Australia. And if you're watching this, you know he agreed to be a speaker here for the Australia virtual event that we put on here. And Tolga, I really appreciate you doing this, and welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, buddy. I've never done a talk to guys in the US, and it's a very different market. I mean, most of the people that invest and trade in the ASX have heard of me one way or another, just because I've either been a substantial holder in something, or I've been buying one of their stocks, or there's been rumors that I'm buying their stock, and all sorts of stuff, which makes it interesting for me. Which kind of makes me almost a colorful character, but
you're like the Dos Equis guy. You're like the most interesting man in the world type situation for American investors. Like, who's this guy Tolga?
Yeah.
Personally, I've never met anybody named Tolga.
Just a boy from the burbs that got lucky. That's what I am.
Well, let's find out about that a little bit, man. I mean, let's start off. I want to give people some context as to, not only is this already, I think people can tell, going to be a really fun and interesting conversation, and but at the end of the day, let's give the people a little background. Where did your passion for investing get started? And don't worry, everybody, we got plenty of stories we're going to get into. Okay, we're going to start off here and then go there.
I'll take a step back just so you understand my context and where I grew up and my background. My father was a migrant to Australia, could hardly speak English, worked 3 jobs, did night school to help me go through school.
From where?
Sorry?
From where originally? Yeah.
Dad's background's a mixture of, he was born in a place in Macedonia, in Eastern Europe, Southern Europe. Migrated to Turkey when he was 2 years old. My mother was also Turkish. They came to Australia in 1968.
Wow.
So my mum came in 1968. Dad in 1977. I was born in 1978. Dad could hardly speak English. He was working as taxi driver, all sorts of just migrant type jobs when they're first coming to a new country. And bit of tough. We didn't really have any money. My mum developed lupus in her fingers and she couldn't really work. So kind of hard there as well. So my dad just single income, 3 boys. He was doing, literally after he learned English, he was doing night shift as a taxi driver for 20 years. So that was his thing. My next door, the area we grew up, we weren't, I classified by the dogs that we had in our street. It was either my mates were comparing who had the toughest Rottweiler or the toughest pit bull. Like, we weren't Pomeranians in my area. So that gives you a little bit of context of where I came from. And yeah, I didn't have the easiest life. 2 things I did have. I was always a little shit. Like, I was a little terror as a kid. So, but a couple of things that I knew about myself, even when I was young, my ability to take information, whatever I was working on, and to be able to compute that and come to an outcome was quick. So even when I was a child, I knew that I was a little bit faster than everyone else in my class. I'm sitting there going, why isn't everyone else doing this? And because I had all this time on my hands, I was a terror. How do I go from there to here is a number of, I call it, if you ever watched that movie Sliding Doors,
I haven't seen that one.
Okay, there's a movie called Sliding Doors. I can't remember the actor in it, but it's they replay a guy's life 4 times over, and he makes a different decision at one point in each one, and it comes out to a completely different scenario as in terms of the ending. And so my life with the sliding doors there's been so many sliding door moments that have just took me from, worrying about my next door neighbor's Rottweiler beating me up and biting me, whatever, to, living over the beach and having all the cars and the fancy toys and all sorts of stuff. So it's been a dramatic change, and it's probably not where I should have ended up, but it's a testament to people watching that if I can do it, if I can go from there to where I am now and with my investment strategies that I employ, and how they worked for me, then anyone can. So that's probably the key takeaway. But in terms of actually initially moving into, investing, I was working 3 jobs as when I was 15 years old. I was at high school. I was washing cars. So I was a kid at the car wash. that was doing your vacuuming. I was working for the local, like the Walgreens, but in the fruit and vegetable area.
Yep.
And I was working at a fruit market. At the fruit market, I don't know if they have this in America, but I was a spruiker. I was that kid that would put on the crate at the end of the day.
I was gonna say, I saw that in your Q&A that you did. I was like, I've never heard of a spruiker. What? Sorry, I cut you. You're telling us what a spruiker is. All right.
So I don't know what it's like in America, but in Australia they call it a spruiker. They put, at the end of like the markets here, they go from say Friday to Sunday, and the Sunday afternoon, all the perishables have got to be sold. So things like your lettuce or your tomatoes or whatever, they're not going to last another week. So you've got to just move them. So effectively, I was making markets, and if the tomatoes were $2.50 a kilo, I would just stand on this crate and be screaming out to all these people that are waiting for the bargains. It's now $2 a kilo, and they'd sell through, and then people wait a little bit longer, and they become $1.50 a kilo. And I'd be like saying each of the different perishables, I'd be singing out. So effectively, I was making a market. So I learned supply and demand very early. I was 15 years old at the time when I was doing this, and there'd be crowds of people around me. I'm waiting to see what I was going to, produce next. But how I got into my first ever investment was, I was 18 years old and just got a license to drive, but I set up my own car wash. I don't know if they probably have Westfields in the US. So Westfield Shopping Center. Yeah. So it was a Westfield Shopping Center, about 20 minutes from my house. And we got a lease, me and my best friend. And we set up car wash inside the car park in the shopping center. So we set them up in Australia. And I learned there to make money, to sell, because obviously trying to upsell everyone that's coming through. But we had this one client who came in, and he was this Korean gentleman, very distinguished, but he would come every Saturday, and I'd have a conversation with me every Saturday. He'd pep talk me every Saturday about business. And I was still at University of the States, so I studied banking and finance at one of the major universities here. And one day he comes in and he says, "Tolga, have you saved any money?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I've saved a little bit of money." It's like, "Oh," and for me, at the time, I think it was like 25 grand. And I said, he goes, "Oh, you know what? We're going to open you a trading account, an online trading account, a bit like your Robin Hood guys." And I was like, "Okay, let's do it." And he's like, "Okay, well," I did that. And the next week he came in and he said, "We're buying these shares in this tiny little tech company." But in America, it's very different. Like $1 or $2, $5 share would be considered a spec play. In Australia, it's the equivalent of 19 cents is the spec play. So he made me he put $20,000. So most of my savings that I'd saved over the last 12 months into this tiny little company. Anyway, 8 months goes past, and this little thing goes from 19 cents to $1.80. And he turns up. This is just at the tech boom. So it's 1999. So as you know what happened, parabolic, everything was remotely technology. If I had a keyboard, it was through the roof, $1 billion valuation. So I bought these shares, went to there. He comes in one day, he says, "Tolga, it's time to sell." So about $1.60, $1.70, I sold these shares, and I made, for me, it was a ridiculous amount of money. It's a couple $100,000. My dad's a taxi driver. Probably in his entire life of working, he's maybe made $1 million. Right. So for me to, at 18, 19 at this point, have a couple $100 grand, I was like, Jesus, this is wow. Where have they been hiding this? Bring me more. I want to learn how to do this. So I sold the shares, banked this cash, and he actually said to me, he goes, "Tolga, don't invest." And this is just to the peak, coming towards the peak of the tech boom. And I didn't listen. I took most of the money out, and whatever, and I left, I think it was like $40,000, $50,000 in there, and I bought, the tech boom started to unfold, and I bought some shares thinking, it's gone cheap. Yeah, I learned a lesson there. It didn't go cheap. I went to zero. The company I was buying these things that didn't actually have anything. And
was this all an ASX listed stocks?
All
okay.
ASX.
Gotcha.
So in terms of my experience, I've traded US indices, and I've got a whole bunch of things in Canada I've traded as well, but predominantly ASX is where I do most of my investing. Anyway, I lost that money real quick, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this was great on the way up, but far out on the way down, this is not fun. And from that point on, I was studying at university. I wanted to be an FX dealer. So my dream job was to be an FX commodity trader. And yeah, after this experience with this guy, I was like, no, I want to be in markets. I want to be in stocks. This is what I think I want to do with the rest of my life. So yeah, end up selling the car wash and moving on. So
there you go. I was gonna say that'll definitely get you into investing right there. That'll get you, some people that'll get you out.
Yeah,
but you said, but you stuck with it. So to catch us up to where we're at today. All right, so you're back at zero. Well, you had a couple things saved, so you weren't totally at zero, but you were at zero.
Oh no, yeah, but there's been every story. There's the ups and then there's the downs, and I've had plenty of them.
All right. So let's catch us up. So from that point, how did we get to where you're at today?
I worked so I was trying to break into stockbroking, and I'll be honest with you, unless you're like your dad's a client or his mates with the CEO or something like that. And I didn't have that leg up right in life. My dad was a taxi driver, so he doesn't know anyone. I'm applying for thousands of jobs to do anything in a stockbroking firm, like any job, like paperwork. I don't care, whatever it was. And I had a couple of those, and it kind of didn't really give me a leg up at all, and I wasn't really learning anything. But I kind of just progressed in that back office to middle office role, and I was earning about 120 grand a year working for a group called ANZ Nominees, and it was just basically doing the paperwork for offshore fund managers that were investing in Australia. So just all the compliance stuff, all the corporate action stuff. I then applied for a job as a dealer assistant to these 5 highly experienced and talented Jewish stockbrokers. So the Jewish stockbroking firm. And the job was paying $27,000 a year, including super. So I'm taking an 80 grand pay cut to get an education. And
my brother,
I went for 7 interviews. Okay. 7 interviews. They actually finally called me. And the reason why they called me is, there's actually a story in this in itself. I applied for thousands of these jobs and I never got a call, right? Anything front office, did client facing was just impossible to get unless you had experience or was related to somebody. In my resume, I put that I played poker as my hobby. Instead of football, instead of baseball and basketball, or whatever else. I put all that stuff out. I'm just going to put something different. And don't get me wrong, I'm no professional poker player, but just like everybody else, you play poker. But
play poker, yeah.
So after
we all know game theory. Come on, right?
Yeah.
We're all game theorists here.
That's it, right? And I'll get to that. So I put a poker on my thing, and the next day I got a phone call. I was like, wow, oh my God, I might actually have an interview. So I did 7 interviews later with each of the dealers individually and then all together as a group. So I went through this massive process for a $27,000 a year job. And I got it. And I fell in love. Like I realized that this is what I wanted to do with my life. I started with these guys and they took me under their wing, highly talented, dealing for the biggest. And they were basically dealing for the large Jewish families in Australia. And really talented. And I learned from them how to sell, strategy, understanding and doing due diligence on on companies, on directors, the way they were thinking when they were talking, trying to pick apart the different ideas and strategies that they were coming. And over time, you kind of know who's kind of bullshitting you and who's not. Right? And I learned from these guys pretty quickly. So I got my education and I was meant to be an assistant for 4 years. I lasted 8 months before they just gave my license and said, you know what, you're good enough to keep on your own. And then I became, I think there's 100 stockbrokers in the firm. I think I was up to number 3 in terms of revenue writing within 12 months. I was just so passionate, so driven, so in love with what I was doing that like nothing was going to stop me. And then I went through, well, I'll take a step back. So I worked with them, but in the 3 months after my probation period had finished, here's where it's interesting. So I got my job, put the poker on my resume, and I sat down with the individual who hired me, and his name was Russell. Russell, I asked him, I said, Russell, why did you pick out my resume? Like, if you get it down, he goes, yeah, we had hundreds of them. And he goes, you're in bold writing, you put poker as your hobby. And it was like everyone else had the same university, the same kind of experience. I was intrigued. I said, what about poker, Russell? And he goes, well, and he said, poker, you understand numbers, you understand strategy, you understand when to hold, when to fold. You also know how to read people. If you're a poker player, these are skills that you have to have. And I was like, that's actually really smart. That's really, really intelligent, Russell. I said, what if I bluffed you? And he just looked at me. He said, he goes, you're scary. And I was like, yo, Russell, I know how to play poker. I'm just not a professional poker player. I just thought this is how I'm going to get my resume on the top of the pile. And that's what I did. So yeah, that's how I got my foot in the door, and I got my education in markets. That was in 2006, 2007, and then obviously 2008 occurred, and the world kind of crumbled and blew up, and yeah, which was also an interesting experience, especially from someone who hadn't seen that on the side of a dealing desk. I've witnessed it and I felt it as in 2000 with the tech crash.
Right.
But I hadn't seen it from the other side and what happens in a stockbroking firm when the world's literally falling apart.
Right.
So there are a couple of interesting experiences that I've gone through. Markets on the way up and markets on the way down. It's
That's for sure. So, okay. So then from there, you're working as a stockbroker. And then, by the way, we were introduced by at the market HC, he's remaining anonymous. So we won't say his name, but he introduced us. And one of the things I read and why I wanted to do this and invite you to do this keynote is he did a great Q&A with you where he went, you guys talked about saying, what you learned from your biggest winners and losers. So one thing I want to do to catch us up again to where we are today is from there. That's when you decided to go to the other side. You found a company that looked pretty interesting, and you more or less went all in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to tell everybody to do this because I took a ridiculous amount of risk, right? And I'll qualify it and quantify it. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids to think about or worry about. I need to protect. So when someone in my situation, that 29, 30-year-old, where the only responsibility I had was me. I had my parents and my brothers, but it was really just me. I wasn't risking someone else's life. If I was successful, my parents and I'd have a better life, great. But I wasn't risking my children's future and lots of stuff. So I have a history of just going all in.
And not only that, I mean, you had faith in yourself. Like you already experienced a complete loss. So, hey, I see something I like. Why not?
Well, I'm gonna have
Let's go for it. Yeah.
So I had a couple of wins on the way. So in 2009, the broking firm that was holding my parents' assets and my assets went bankrupt. And I didn't realize, but effectively the way their conditions were written up, that we'd pledged all our securities to them. So they all evaporated. So I was like, what have I done? This is ridiculous. How come I didn't read the fine print? And no one did. And they were like holding billions of dollars worth of people's assets. So it was a disaster. And I had to start again. So I went from zero. So when I talk about the ups and downs, this is like a zero moment here. So I've been up and down, and then flat to the point where I didn't really, I hate to say it, try and tell your parents you lost their entire life savings when your dad's a taxi driver for 20 years, doing night shift. It's not an easy thing. And basically I didn't want to be breathing. All right, picture that. Imagine telling your dad that.
Let alone anybody.
Yeah, telling anybody. Yeah, your father. Yeah, the guy that's actually slaved away to raise you, take you to the point where you've actually got your education. Anyway, it was tough. Dad told me, as he should. He basically just told me the expletives I'll keep out, but what he thought of me was not very commendable. But my mother says to me, son, you're incredibly intelligent. You pick things up real fast. This is going to be a blip in your life. One day you can look back and probably can tell stories about it. And she said to me, all I want you to do is go back and go get it back. And she said, the money you've lost for us today, you're going to spend in a day for fun and not going to care. And you can do it again the next day and for fun. There was no actual asset. You're just going to be doing it for fun. And she was right. She But what she did was she actually inspired me. My dad was putting me took me to the point where I didn't want to breathe. Mum was like, "Tolga, you're actually a superhero. Go get it." And I did. So I went all in, and this is because I had to believe in myself. I'm like, I've got to get this right. And I did a couple of deals, and I went from having, I'd say, $50,000 from being a broker, turned that into about $1.5, $2 million. And then I got on a plane because all my clients had made this kind of money as well. They're used to making, 5,000%, 2,000% returns. They're like, "Tolga, go do it again." We got on a plane, and in Australia, it's predominantly junior mining stocks that you can do that with, the risk return. Went to Africa, went all over Africa. I spent 9 months running around with a backpack, looking for opportunities in different jurisdictions. I was hiring geologists from the mines department, looking at different assets, and teamed up with a guy, and we got sold a dud uranium license in Mozambique, northern Mozambique, which effectively I saw it was a dud uranium license. They'd never really been there, but it was the world's largest and highest grade graphite deposit, sticking out of the ground. It was 6 kilometers long, about 1.5 k's wide, outcrop mountain. It was 200 meters high, going an average of about 12, 13% graphite. So it was basically just the best graphite deposit ever. And when we got there, the geologists with me were like, "Oh, who cares? It's just graphite." Right? Nice. No one cared. And I was like, wait a sec. I've read about this guy, Elon, who is building his battery plant. And this is, I think it was 2011. So 2012, when Elon was just getting started in this space. I think they just had the first Roadster. They didn't even have the other cars yet.
Yep.
And I remember reading it, I was like, man, there's an opportunity here. People don't understand this. This is where the world's graphite's going to come from. When electric vehicles actually becomes commonplace. This is where it's coming from. So
this is in 2009, right?
2011 is when I made the investment. 2012 is when I took the company to market. 2013, I resigned as a stockbroker, and I went to be an executive director and then managing director of the company. And then, I don't know if you remember, but there was a massive amount of hype, and still is, with regards to electric vehicles becoming commonplace. And Syrah, which was the name of the company, the graphite mine company, I raised about $500 million. I built the plant, but I built it too quick. Now, with any kind of mine, it typically takes 10 to 12 years to develop an asset. And because of my passion, my vision, and basically the hype around electric cars and all the Tesla and whatever, I built it in 6, which was faster than the world can adapt electric vehicles to the point where it's commonplace. And so it was kind of to my detriment and the company's detriment that I did it that fast. I should have actually placed it out a little bit longer. But having said that, the plant's been built. It's effectively just waiting for the EV boom to come. And I'll talk about this a little bit, just in terms of my views on the electric vehicles and where it sort of sits. I liken it to the tech boom. I liken it to what happened in 99, 2000. Everyone was aware there was going to be a tech boom. Right? Everyone was comfortable. It's going to have technology, it's going to become commonplace. But it didn't happen until 7 years later. All the entrepreneurs started in 99, 98. They all started looking at these businesses, and then Google and Facebook, and go through the list. All these companies were starting then in garages and sheds and lots of stuff. But it wasn't until 2007, 2008, 2009 when they actually started to kick off properly. I liken the same thing to EVs.
Yep.
Kind of started in 2010, 2011, started to get a bit more support from all the car manufacturers, and they kind of have to now because of what Elon's done to them. He's embarrassed them all. So they don't have a choice but to have a EV line for every single model they do. So come the next couple of years, I can't tell you when exactly, but the next couple of years when these cars become commonplace and it becomes the norm, more norm to buy and drive EVs, you'll see a massive influx. And that's when that Syrah project and company will have the most amount of impact in terms of its revenue.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that was probably the big kicker. Then I obviously resigned as CEO. They brought in someone from BHP who's got a lot more experience operating and running operating organization like that scale. And I went to retire or resign. I resigned and I went to retire. I was going to do, my dream was to go around the world, just go snowboarding for a year or two after.
Oh, that's awesome.
Living on a plane for 6 months. But anyway, yeah.
I gotta quickly follow up there. Well, where was the coolest place you snowboarded? I mean, I have to ask that question.
My favorite place is probably Aspen.
Nice.
But I've been to Switzerland, a place called St. Moritz in Switzerland, every other year. And I love it there. It's just, cool.
So I got to ask you, okay, so as an Australian investor, because as I said at the outset here, you're speaking to kind of a new audience, North American audience here, what would you say was your biggest advantage? Being obviously you're Australian, you're looking at ASX stocks, but what did you figure out about the ASX markets that you would say gave you the advantage?
My personal advantage is when I was a stockbroker. What I would do is these junior companies would want to come in and present. They're all looking for capital, and I would take every single meeting. Like I would never say no to anybody, because it's just, you never know. So I was getting an education on every single project, every deposit, every director walking through. I built relationships with them. And what would typically happen is by the end of the presentation, they're pitching me, I'd end up signing them up with accounts. So I then had this massive database of directors and geologists and mining engineers as my clients. And I built this database, and effectively, when I came up with an idea that I thought was interesting, I would put a blanket email out, burst an email saying, does anyone understand this project and what do they think about it? And blah, blah, blah. So I get all these data points back from everybody that has an opinion, and all these geologists, they all have opinions. Some right, some wrong, but I was able to sift through, and I was basically getting an education from these guys. And I'm not a trained geologist, but you can put a rock in front of me and I can tell you what's in it, what it looks like, and then basically figure out, calculate the economics of a project. So I got to that point where I was, I built that skill base, and I still have those networks. So when something comes up, I think I'd say, I know whether it's going to work or it's not going to work very quickly. I say no to probably 99% of the projects that are put in front of me. But yeah, when I say yes, then I go, as you said before, I'm all in. I'll buy 10, 15, 20% of the company. And that's, that is how I operate.
So at the end of the day, your real advantage, it sounds like this is something that can be used ASX, any kind of investor across any market. It's just information gathering, especially in microcaps. I mean, we're talking about it. There's just so much information out there. So, I mean, it sounds like you were just like, look, I need to get as much information out there as I possibly can. These are the types of companies and people that I'm seeing the most of. So why not just learn from the best? Let me just come in here. Let me talk to me.
It doesn't matter which exchange. It doesn't matter actually if it's a stock market, whatever it is you're dealing with in the world, whatever your issue is, go find someone who's an actual expert in it, who's had experience, both failing and succeeding. I can need both, because you'll learn something from either side, and then you'll apply it. So use your own knowledge and your own intellect and go, so does this make sense to me? And actually just ask yourself, does it make sense? And sometimes when you're saying that, I do this myself. This is why I use my brokers. Like I don't use computer online trading anymore. I use brokers specifically so I can explain to them what I'm thinking. And if I sound dumb halfway through, something's not right. If I'm going, that actually doesn't, he's going to look at me really funny right now.
Right.
So it's just saying things out aloud after you've made a decision. You know pretty quickly if your theory is logical and if it's not, and if the company's going to have potential growth or not, or if it's overvalued or not,
Well, I mean, at that point, I think, the broker talking knows that you're pretty successful. So at this point, they're like, oh, okay, it's a good thing you at least have that on filter, because they're just been, yeah, sure, okay, whatever do you want to do? Yeah, that's fine.
That actually does happen. But the thing is, I pull myself up. I'm like, wait a sec, that didn't make sense to me. I'm like, I need to think this through. And when they're trying to pitch me ideas, the same thing happens to them. They're like telling me, all right, talk to me. Tell me why I should put money in this thing. Tell me why I should own 10% of it. And there'll be a point where they're like, I'll actually stop talking and go, actually, that doesn't make much sense. And that person is probably not telling me the truth because that doesn't make any logic, So that's probably the key advantage. It's just being able to reach out to different networks.
All right, Tolga, one last investing-y type question, and then we'll get into like a couple stories before we close out here. So for the North American audience, there's a lot of myths when it comes to thinking about looking at ASX, and this is going to be kind of funny talking to somebody who made their money in mining stocks, but whatever, it is what it is. Is one myth that most people think about when they think about ASX listed stocks is, all right, it's all junior mining, and it's a similar thing that we've seen when it comes to Canadian markets. They think, there's only, it's mostly driven by junior mining, which, hey, those are markets it is what it is, right? So what are some other myths that maybe you could debunk for investors that are looking at it or assessing investments in the ASX?
Some myths. There's a couple of myths talking about with regards to, we don't really have many technology stocks, but we actually do. There's been quite a number of technology companies that have come out of Australia. And there's one that we're probably going to be in detail to because we might actually know about it in the States. There's a company called Afterpay, which is like a buy now, pay later type of business. And it was, there was a couple of guys with an idea, had $100 million market cap, and they grew it exponentially in Australia, went offshore. It's all over the States now. I think it's like a $25 billion company. And this is in the space of maybe 3 years. So it's a quick idea. They use technology to expand it. It's a historically known industry. So we're not just mining stocks. We do have entrepreneurs in that space. We don't do much manufacturing in Australia. So that's one issue. And that's because we're so close to China. They effectively just dump whatever they want into our economy. You probably talked to Trump about that. So that's one main one. We do have technology stocks. We do have that industry, but the majority of the money here is made in mining. And I'll be, again, brutally honest. Most of these junior miners don't actually work. They won't be mines. Like they might have a deposit, but it's not that easy to build a mine, right? You need hundreds of millions of dollars. People have really got to believe in it. It's got to look like it's amazing to attract that kind of capital. So my word of advice to people is, high probability it's not going to be a mine. So if you're in an idea and it looks like it's going great, you'd always want to take something off the table. So you do want to trade them. Some of my ideas that I've made most money out of, they don't exist anymore. They were great. So it is do trade the stocks is what I'm going to say. Unless you've got unbelievable conviction, which I do in some of my businesses, some of the positions I have, that I'll just hold and hold and hold. As long as, and this is probably a key takeaway. People sometimes are like, stock's gone up 10 times. You made 10 times your money. Why are you still holding? And my key takeaway for me is, as long as the management team keeps hitting catalysts that they put forward to the market, and myself, I'm talking to them privately. I think I'm going to discover this, or I think this is what it's going to look like, and this is what the grade could be, or the size could be. And I think it's going to grow a little bit more. But if they keep hitting it, it doesn't give me any reason to sell out. Because making 2 times your money doesn't really change your life. You want to find something that's gone from 5 cents to $2, or $5 to $200. You want to find those companies, and the only way to hold them is with confidence, in my opinion, is if they keep hitting catalysts and you build a relationship with the MD. He's not fibbing you because he hasn't before. That's probably my key takeaway in terms of myths. Yeah, that's like I said, most of them don't work. And if my advice would be, sell if they don't deliver on a catalyst, and if they do keep delivering, go for the ride.
Gotcha. All right. And real quick, are you shareholder in Afterpay? You did mention that one.
No, I'm not a shareholder. I wish I was. It was like a $2 stock. I think it was like $1.50, and it's now it's $100. So think of it, it's gone from, it's like in your terms, makes sense to US investors, it's gone from $10 to 1,000. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's that base expression.
It's a beautiful thing. That's why we do what we do, man. That's why we're in MicroCaps.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right, Tolga. So I got to, we talked offline to prepare for this. I know you got stories for days. I know we don't have, you're a busy guy. I know you don't have a ton of time, but give us a couple good investing stories, going out into the bush, what you got?
Okay. I'll go you going out in the bush. I'll tell you when I went out in the desert.
All right. Let's hear this. All right. I like it. It's a good start.
Yeah, it's a there. So, this is part of my Africa trip. So it was 2011 and I've gone to South Africa. I met the Minister of Mines and a couple of mining entrepreneurs that live in Mauritania. Got on a plane. I went to see them. I was like, oh, I'll come to your country. I've never been to Mauritania. I've never been to Africa. So it was me in a backpack going basically middle of nowhere. God knows what's going to happen to me. But like I said, I was willing to take all the risk. Anything could happen, but I was on my way. And we're driving up north, and you guys will know this project. I was going north of Tasiast, which is owned by Kinross, I think, still. Well, it was owned by Kinross. And it's basically the Mauritanian desert, the Sahara. So I'm looking for gold in the Sahara. So this doesn't make much sense, but I knew that there was this massive Tasiast deposit, which was owned by Redback once upon a time. Then it was Kinross, and I think it might be Barrick or someone now, but I'm north of this project by about 150 kilometers in a place called the Western Sahara, which no man has claimed. And I've got out of the car. I was like, we've been driving for hours over sand dunes. And I'm like, what am I doing here? I said, look, at least I want some photos to prove that I was here. Like, no one's this crazy to come to a place like this. So I was told him to stop the car. There's this massive sand dune. Climb up on top of the sand dune and I'm looking around, and there's this 3 heads bobbing up in the distance coming towards me. I'm like, we haven't seen single life form for like 6 hours of driving, like nothing. There's nothing. There's 3 people walking towards us, and I'm like, Jesus. Anyway, we see them, and they've got these guns, and they're effectively Tuaregs in the middle of the Sahara Desert. I'm like, Jesus, what have I got myself into? Anyway, I gave them all my aspirin because half of them are missing their teeth and the pain and whatever. And I was like, here, take these, probably help you. But my funny story is, and from an investment perspective, I was sitting there freaking out thinking I'm in the middle of nowhere. There's no water here. There's nothing here. What am I doing looking for gold? And I said, I remembered whilst I was there, my clients owned about 30%, myself and my clients owned 30% of a company called Aura Energy. And I was like, I'm basically the largest position holder in this business, and the stock was going up, right? So the stock's gone from 10 cents, I think it was like 50, 55 cents. So it's a 500% return. And I said to one of the geologists, I said, mate, whereabouts is the, just one sec, Brad, is, my brother in the background. I said, whereabouts is this project, this Aura Energy project? And they're like, oh, it's about 200 kilometers in that direction. And I'm looking at sand dunes for 200 Ks. I'm like, wow. I'm starting to, my brain's ticking over. I'm like, what? They're not going to be able to build anything out here in the middle of nowhere. This is 200 Ks away. I've
like
living.
The infrastructure, what do you do?
And I'm like, the stock is going up. I don't understand. Someone knows something more than me. So I said, give me a satellite phone. I rang the dealer on the desk. I said, can you please quietly sell me out of every single shareholder out of this company? And she's like, I told you, you've been buying stock for a long time. I said, oh no, look, I've just found another opportunity I think I want to invest in. I didn't want to scare her even. I said, just be quietly, like, don't do it. And some guys out of Hong Kong were really excited about the story, and it was a massive uranium deposit. It was a uranium deposit, mind you. Massive uranium deposit, sediment hosted, So they're like, it's great, it's huge. Now look, everyone's chasing uranium at this point.
Yep.
So I sold the lot, and I got a phone call from the MD, from the chairman. He said, I told you, we've noticed that you're selling all your shares. I said, mate, have you visited your project? I'm like, don't ask me why I sold. Like, have you gone there? And this became one of my key conditions of investing in any asset. I made it a rule that I would have to go and see it with my own eyes and understand the logistics, just the environment, where it is, the type of people that are there, and if it has access to water, does it have access to infrastructure, does it have access to all these things you need? And it was a massive lesson for me. I was probably 31, 32 at the time when this was happening. I was like, I'm getting an education firsthand by getting off my butt and going and seeing these things. And I'm in the middle of Sahara with some guys with guns, they're Tuaregs, God knows God, they're basically guerrillas. And I'm on a satellite phone trying to sell out some shares through my corner office on Collins Street, which is effectively your Wall Street in Australia, right? So there you go. There's an investing story.
That's a good one right there.
Where I got my part of my education.
That's a good one right there. So I got one last question for you before I let you go. So if there's one, and I got to give credit where credit is due. I hit up at Gladiator HC. I'm like, look, I'm talking to Tolga, man. Like, give me one question that you didn't get to ask him that you think our collective audiences would love to hear. So
I'm curious.
All right, so here we go. He goes, if there's one piece of advice you'd give someone who is in your position after you lost everything in 2009, what would it be?
I say this often, and I say it because it's to be successful. It doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter what topic, market, whether it be your family, your business, your investments, whatever it is, you need energy, right? As a human being, for your brain to function properly, for your body to function properly, you need energy. So you need to be fit. And I'm talking about being healthy. So having healthy habits. Because if you're sitting on the couch, you're eating chips and Coke and McDonald's and lots of stuff, and you're not doing the work to burn it and keeping your body fit, and you're not going to be thinking properly, your actions and your thoughts aren't going to be structured in the best possible manner. So you're not going to make the best decisions. So the one thing that I do is you want to run, you want to walk, you want to do something that's going to keep your body not in peak physical condition, but enough to be able to give you the energy, the ability, the stamina to actually be able to make decisions. Like when you're at the end of the day and you're really tired and you've got to make a choice, you don't be like, oh my God, I just made that choice for the sake of it. Like you want to have the ability, the capacity in yourself to be able to think it through, actually take action on it. And whether it be your investments, you can get lucky, but if you do the work and if you're going to ask all the questions, like I'm saying, I learned from people because I was constantly asking people smarter than me what to do. So yeah, my advice to anybody, forget the stock market, forget everything else. Try and eat as well as you possibly can. Number two is get off your backside and go for a walk, whether it be half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, or run if you're fitter. And eventually you'll get to that point. And I come up with my best ideas, my best thought process is when I've got those headphones on and I'm going, because I've got no distractions. You're only thinking about that one topic that's on your mind. And you feel amazing after you've done it. It's sometimes annoying getting off your backside and going, but that's that'd be my one thing, not from an investment perspective, but just a life perspective.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, it's stuff that you have control of, right? Like,
yeah,
you make a wrong choice, sometimes there's nothing you can do, but at the end of the day, if you can keep the vessel healthy, keep that going, don't worry, you'll
get you back up and going. It also gives you the ability to stand back up and say, oh, that didn't work. Well, bad luck, it didn't work. You've got the energy to go again. And the other key advice, and I consider myself lucky, and this word called luck, people are like, you create your own luck, and people say you weren't lucky, you made it happen. So you can only make it happen if you have stamina, right? If you're there and you see the opportunity, and if your body and your brain aren't working in unison, you're not going to see the opportunity. So that's probably if you want to get lucky, be fit, be there, be present. And if you are fit and healthy, you will be present.
I think that's a great way to end it. Tolga, where can my audience go and find more information about you, follow your thoughts, insights, everything like that?
Yeah, just my Twitter. You can see it all. It's all there.
What's the handle? It's at I should have it.
Look at it at Tolga Kumova.
At Kumova, at Kumova Tolga. That's
Tolga,
at KUMOVATOLGA. That's on Twitter.
Yeah. I give my rants. I kind of enjoy it.
Dude, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this,
Thanks,
man.
Bobby.
And we're definitely gonna do this again, I'm sure.
Thanks, Bobby. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for listening.